Hello, my name is Phillip Radke and I'm going to be giving a video screencast presentation of Milestone 1. So here's my index page. Simply has 3 links. There's a menu, login, register, and home. Click login, it'll take you to a login screen. I already have a few usernames set up. I think test is one of them, and I can just log in. And that's welcoming me, and it's giving a query to my SQL server. Same thing with register, you just enter the information, first name, Mike Blajinski, email, don't matter. Username, we'll do test 6. And we'll just have the same password I've been using for everything is test. And registration, successful. Thank you for joining, and then it lists the information that you have entered before. Click home. And I should note that after registration it also logs you in to that user ID. Let's move over to our source code. This is the index page. It simply has the a div for the header, div for the menu, div for menu items, and div for the footer, which is down here, pasted to the bottom of the viewport. The login.html page is fairly straightforward. Same menu items as before, and it has the div for the main content, which contains a form, and the form contains a table that contains the username input and password input, which are both required items, and then a submit button, which takes you to the login controller.php, which just takes in the username and password that was input from login.html. It includes this functions.php, which we'll go into later. A message is gathered from the function user login, which we'll see in our functions.php. The message is then echoed down here in the body after the menu, and followed by the footer. So let's head into the register user.html. The register user is basically the same thing as the login, except that it has more values to input that would allow you to register a user. And then the submitting that takes you to register controller, and much of the same thing as the login controller, just has a message variable that's declared that it receives a message from register user, which in any case would be a successful registration and login, or a failed for whatever reason, whether it be a duplicate email. Well, let's just look at it. Functions.php. So our first function, fairly straightforward. dbConnect function just connects to the database. Pretty straightforward, not much to go over there. Just returns a MySQL object. Function user login takes in the username and password, checks to make sure that they are not null or blank, because that's pretty important, even if the this failsafe is in here, even though the login says it's required. I had it in there just in case. It returns the failed message if it's null or blank. It connects to the database, sends a query, selects the username and password, selects user ID, first name and last name, where the username and password equal the input from before, and stores that into a variable result. Result is then said how many number of rows is returned. If 0, then it's failed. then you are given this login failed message with a link to go back to the login.html. And otherwise, if it returns one row, good, success. Save user ID, which is another function down here, which just saves the session variable for the user ID, and it's a login success. Just gives a simple, returns a simple welcome message after successful login. Same basic concept. This, if it returns more than one row, should never happen, but it was included just in case, because you can't be logged in as more than one user from the same client, and it will just return this fail message, and then you would not be logged in. And otherwise, it would send likely an SQL error. Please contact an administrator. Simple. Register user is much the same, except it has additional variables. Connects to the database. Selects, first of all, it selects the checks to see if there's a username that already is registered under that username, or email, sorry. This should be email. Okay, so it's just going to check for that email address and see if it already was registered as a user. If so, it's going to return this fail message and nothing else will come of it. Otherwise, it gives an insert into query, fairly straightforward, closes the database, and logs in the successfully registered user and returns this wonderful message: registered successfully. Thank you for joining. The following information is used for registration, as we saw previously here. And then otherwise another error was occurred and that message is returned. So as for our session variables, it's fairly straightforward. All we have is a ID as for right now. That's all that is entirely necessary at this point. If we need any additional session variables, it's not that difficult to add some more, and we will do so as necessary. Here's my style.css. I have the body style set to minimum height 99%, so that my footer will stay stuck to the bottom of the page, no matter what size the screen is. This could also be accomplished by wrapping the entire page in another div just as a wrapper, and then have that be the same, this min height be 99%. The same thing that I have here with the body. I'm not sure if this will cause problems later on once we get our page big enough, but that's what this comment is for, so we can find out. Our header, fairly simple. Nothing entirely mind-blowing here. Everything is fairly straightforward. Nothing major to report other than our CSS page. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.